Hey there, and welcome to some more dragon reviews. I've gone through all the attacker and tank dragons at this point, and next is the support dragons. There are going to be 4 videos going through this, and in this video we're going to go through Icesong, Leviathan, and Nether Shrike. But before I talk about them, I want to talk about support dragons in general. So while I talked about attacker dragons, I was saying they die regularly, they die really easily, they deal great damage, and they generally want to attack from range and stuff. Tank dragons, they deal basically no damage, so you can actually in the training ignore their strength and ignore their damage skill and just train their like defense buff and the stamina, their health. When it comes to support, they're a bit weird. They're actually kind of less good in general than the other 2 types, I would say. The reason being is because they don't do anything exceptionally well. They're not as good at damage dealing as the attackers, and so the damage they deal is fine, but it's not actually like anywhere near as much as what your character does, so it doesn't help out that much. And then in terms of tanking, well, they don't really tank very well, and there's quite a big difference between surviving enemies and dying off in 20-30 seconds. It's like, great, they kind of are a distraction, but you want more than a distraction if you want a dragon to be doing something. So support dragons, they don't really fit the roles particularly well. Support dragons, the stat line is actually what all dragons used to be before they made tanks and attackers more unique with the stats, and it just didn't really do that well. So when it comes to support dragons, in terms of training them, well, in general, support dragons, they're very hit and miss. Some support dragons are very strong and they do certain things very well, but it's more like, do they have a skill that is specifically useful for something? Or are they just kind of like generic damage, stun, knockback, that kind of stuff? In which case, you'd much rather use an attacker dragon that does something like that, or you use a tank dragon that does something useful. That's kind of my feeling on support dragons in general, and I think if you were to question most people about it, they'd probably say the same. Like, if they looked at dragons in general and what they did and all that stuff, they'd think that support dragons are a little weaker in that regard. Now, that said, of course, there are some really big standout support dragons that do amazing things, and I'm obviously going to highlight them as I go through, but I just want to say that first of all, that there are going to be some support dragons which I'm very down on, and I just say are rubbish, and they do, you can use them, they'll do something in a battle, but they're not really going to help you anywhere near as much as what you'll get from some tank dragons or attacker dragons. Support dragons attack from range, and their basic attack rate is 2 per second, so they're exactly like attacker dragons in that regard. And so for that reason, they're not really going to get in the way and stop you from taking damage, and they're also they don't kind of give you an advantage the way attacker dragons do. If you say attacker dragons, you may put some effort into making sure they don't die, and then the reward is a lot of damage. Support don't really have that, but there are some which are really good. Anyway, I've rambled on long enough. Let's have a look at these 3 dragons. First off, we're going to look at their claw requirements, and silver and experience. Now, because they're the first dragons, they're very cheap to get up. So about 800 claws, 14 million silver, and 45 million experience. All 3 of them are the same with that. We've got Nether Shrike here as well. And if I can remember, the name of the last one is Leviathan, I think. Leviathan, same again. So pretty cheap to get up. No worries there. No problems at all. Now, of these 3, Icesong is by far the most exciting. This one is actually decent in a lot of ways. But as with the other types of dragons, the other, tank and attacker, the first 2 dragons come with lower stats compared to the rest. The rest are kind of similar-ish, but the first 2 come with quite a lot less. So Icesong, unfortunately, has quite a lot lower health than you'd want it to. But what it does, well, it's got 2 skills. The first skill, 6 seconds cooldown, and it does an air effect projectile, doing 4 times basic damage, and slowing the attack rate of enemies for a couple of seconds. Now, that attack rate is quite important. This is something which they didn't put on later dragons because, well, these early dragons, they came into the game before PvP was out, and slowing the attack rate of people in PvP means their skill cooldowns get increased. It's hard to know for sure because you don't see their skill cooldowns when this is going on, but it messes up other people in PvP quite nicely, I believe. and otherwise it's quite decent damage output from a skill that happens quite frequently every 6 seconds. So surprisingly good. You know, this is talking about good on support. Now this effect which you see here, this is the awesome part about Icesong. So it does a party damage reduction of 50% for 10 seconds with a 15-second cooldown. So 2/3 of the time you have 50% damage reduction. This stacks with all other damage reduction effects. So if you have it, say if you're like a knight and use Protector and it gives you 60%, well, that's 60% plus 50%, you're invincible. If you have any other effect that gives you damage reduction, it is greatly increased by this. Archers giving 25% from, you know, whatever, or wizards getting 25% from whatever, suddenly that's halving the damage you take because it's on top of the 50%. So Icesong, having this party buff, it works on itself too, so it helps itself survive better despite it having low health. And yeah, and it also buffs the whole party. So great little support dragon, decent enough damage, air of effect damage too, and it's giving you the party damage reduction. I like this dragon a lot. I think it's really good. It would be even better if it had higher health, but that's fine because, you know, it's a great way to start this off. Next we have Leviathan. Now Leviathan is the start of the really bad support dragons. So this is pretty much an attacker dragon that just has half the attack. So because support dragons attack from range, like, you know, that's what this is going to do. And it's 2 skills. The first skill, 5-second cooldown. It does a projectile dealing 3 times basic damage and knocking an enemy back. Okay, fine. Bit of damage, bit of knockback, whatever. The second skill, 10-second cooldown, single target dealing 6 times basic attack and knocking them down. Now this does more damage, you know, it's double the damage. It's also double the cooldown, so, you know, they're going to be working together to do roughly similar kind of damage per second. Overall, this just doesn't really do much. You can see in terms of damage, compared to other dragons which we've seen on this exact same map, it's not doing a whole lot in terms of killing this crystal off. It's just not really getting there. And that's pretty much what you see with some of these support dragons. The knockback and knockdown aren't enough to really make this stand out in any way, and the damage output is pretty poor. So the fact that it takes more damage to kill than attacker dragons if it gets hit doesn't really do much. So that first skill, I can't actually remember if it does air of effect. I don't think it does. No, it doesn't. There we go. That was the knockback, and we should see the knockdown, but as you can see, it's getting killed off really quickly compared to the tanks which we just went through. So yeah, that's this dragon. Pretty disappointing, and unfortunately, it's a miss. Lastly, we have Nether Shrike. Now, Nether Shrike is a bit more interesting than Leviathan, but it does come into the same kind of problems. So, first skill, 10-second cooldown. It does a single target, damage over time, dealing 5 hits of 1 times basic attack damage. And the heal effect, where I, to be honest, barely noticed any healing. We had this on, I think it was Twin Tail, which is an attacker dragon that had added life steal or something, and it didn't really heal. I think early on they for some reason just didn't really give the dragons proper healing. They didn't know where they were going with dragons exactly, so no, not much surprise there. But anyway, Nether Shrike does that damage. That's actually reasonable damage. 5 times basic damage. Actually, no, that's not. 10-second cooldown. It's basically worse than Leviathan's one. And Leviathan had 2 damage skills like that. But what's really interesting here on Nether Shrike that I do actually like is it stuns in a massive area for 4 seconds every 20 seconds. So this isn't like crazy or anything. It's a 20-second cooldown. It's not going to be incredible, but it does do a massive area stun. So, oh no, I just used this when it used the stun skill. Okay, we're going to wait and try and tank the damage here. So it comes off cooldown again. I don't want Nether Shrike to die. I want to show you the area that it stuns. And 4 seconds is seriously good. So okay, let's bring them out. Let's see if it does the stun skill. It should be coming up pretty soon. And it'll stun basically everything here. Okay, no, not quite. But it stuns a lot of things. Oh no, it did stun everything. The animation was just bugged. I mean, you can see that it's got buggy animation anyway. But these guys over here, even these got stunned. It's a really cool stun effect. I can imagine in PvP this does have pretty good use because having that massive stun. You need these things to cover large areas in PvP for them to actually really hit enemies. If they just go around the dragon, they often miss other people. But if they're a projectile and they hit a target and stun that, then it works. And if it's like a massive area effect stun, then it works. So Nether Shrike I can definitely see being used in PvP. It deals reasonable damage to a single target, nothing too special, but does some. And then also it will stun everything on the screen, so it will stun other players. And it's a 4-second stun. 4-second stun is really nasty in PvP. So I think Nether Shrike stands out as a PvP dragon. As for PvE, it's fun to look at, but that's about it. So that's this. I should also note it is doing half damage against these shadow enemies, so it would do a bit more, double the damage if that wasn't the case. Anyway, thanks for watching. That's this video. I'll see you in the next one.